airwaves is still operating in that capacity of foreign policy, foreign affairs. Very fascinating amid all the Epstein stuff.
Right.
All tracks back. Kind of weird. Rachel Blevins, thank you so much. And joining us to expand further on these developments in Venezuela, Professor of Latin American and Caribbean Studies and Senior Fellow at COHA, Danny Shaw joins us. Danny, good to see you. So how do you read this move from China, giving Venezuela sort of a temporary forbearance? I mean, there's got to be strings attached. I mean, what do you think they might want?
Well, we would never see something like this from the International Monetary Fund or the World Bank or other U.S. lending institutions, which have implemented structural adjustment programs from Jamaica to Mexico to Argentina across the oppressed countries so they can instill their will in those countries. This grace period is not something we would see from the U.S., even here from our credit card companies or student loan companies at the height of a pandemic. So China has shown a lot of grace indeed with this decision. China has really upset U.S. Unilateral designs for the world with these multipolar policies that have assisted the blockaded and sanctioned countries like Iraq, Cuba, Nicaragua, and Venezuela.
Wow, so you don't think that the Chinese are angling for leverage anywhere? You think this is actually doing a solid for Maduro?
Well, for the Venezuelan people. I'm not saying that the Chinese don't have their own national and international interests, but certainly at the height of this pandemic and at the height of this criminal blockade, the Venezuelan people, with this economic asphyxiation spearheaded by the U.S. government that's cost the Venezuelan economy some $116 billion. This 116, this certainly is very helpful what China is doing.
Yeah, let's hope it is out of good faith. Meanwhile, acting as a private citizen as part of a private humanitarian mission, the former U.S. ambassador to the UN, Bill Richardson, went over to Venezuela. He met with Nicolas Maduro in an effort to free the so-called Citgo 6, those American petroleum executives. He wasn't quite successful on that trip. Those men are still being detained there. But the fact that Maduro was willing to meet with an ex-U.S. diplomat speaks volumes. What does that say to you?
But I would reposition that question, Manila, because I think the Venezuelans are always open to dialogue and sitting down. It's been the Americans, it's been the Obamas and the Trumps, and even if there's a Democratic Kamala Harris and Joe Biden victory in November, is there going to be any pivot towards Venezuela? Are we to think there's going to be a different democratic policy towards Venezuela? It's been nothing but economic asphyxiation and war. Hybrid war. So I wouldn't put this on Nicolas Maduro or the Venezuelan leadership. Now, the Bill Richardson trip is interesting with all the political prisoners we have right here, Matulu Shakur and Leonard Peltier and Mumia Abu Jamal and Asada Shakur, who can't even come back to her own country. It's interesting that Bill Richardson, this quote unquote, humanitarian and private citizen, is so concerned with Green Berets who invaded Venezuela. These are not heroes. These are invaders and occupiers seeking to recolonize Venezuela, carrying out the U.S. agenda. And in terms of the Citgo 6, it's interesting that Bill Richardson failed to mention how the U.S. has frozen all of Citgo's assets, again, at the height of this pandemic. When who does this hurt? This hurts the 30 million people of Venezuela, not the Venezuelan officials.
So given that Washington they were the ones to cut off all relations with Venezuela over a year ago now, does that signal any chance then that relations could be salvaged, or does it not count because Bill Richardson is now a private citizen?
U.S. has shown absolutely no interest in friendship or peace towards Venezuela, mutual coexistence. The Venezuelans have never been aggressive. What have the Venezuelans ever done to us? It's like that Muhammad Ali quote when he was drafted to go bomb and invade Vietnam. The Vietnamese people never called him the N-word. What if the Venezuelan people are not responsible for our problems here? In fact, they're our allies, our sisters and brothers. But whether it's been a Democrat in the Oval Office or a Republican, it's been unrelenting economic, psychological, media, and diplomatic warfare against the Venezuelan people. And I don't think the U.S. people on the right, on the left, liberal, conservative, realize what these suffocating sanctions and what this war against the Venezuelan people has meant for people who are not our enemies, as I say.
Yeah, absolutely. Very important that you underscored that it doesn't matter who is in office, a Republican, a Democrat, that the same sanctions existed. They've ratcheted them up over the years. So interesting to tie that all back to Washington, no matter who's in the Oval Office. Danny Shaw, always appreciate your take. Thank you.
Thanks, Camille.
Now to the latest COVID-19 numbers.